Recovery Sort Of is a podcast where we discuss recovery topics from the perspective of people living in long-term recovery. This podcast does not intend to represent the views of any particular group, organization, or fellowship. The attitudes expressed are solely the opinion of its contributors. Be advised, there may be strong language or topics of an adult nature.
Welcome back. It's Recovery Sort Of. I'm Jason, a guy that is trying to give a message of not using drugs or staying mentally healthy or something to my kids. I don't know. And I'm here with Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jenny, and I'm a person who doesn't have to drink to get through my day anymore.
There you go. That's a good one. So we're going to talk about the idea of how do we talk to our kids about drugs? How do we talk to our kids about mental health? How can we help our kids not need help with mental health or drug addiction or alcohol use, or how to help our kids find better coping skills? I don't exactly know, but something like that.
Yeah, God, are we doing this right? I don't know.
I don't know. This is ridiculous. We're set up in a basement and whatever. Before we get into it, we did get a response or a comment on the "What Does Being Clean Really Mean" episode, and Stephanie, reached out and said that for her, being clean is having a clear spiritual connection with her higher power, so she can work the program and be easily guided. When she puts drugs in her, she stops hearing God, higher power, Buddha, whatever you want to call it. While caffeine technically is a drug, she doesn't consume enough of it to interrupt her spiritual connection or sway her moral compass. If she did, then she would say she was not clean.
Oh, I like that.
It was an interesting take on it, right? Like, what comes between us and that spiritual connection as deciding what's clean? Love Stephanie. I think my perspective would be a little different, because I do believe there's been times when, like, I really wanted that coffee, and without being able to have that coffee, like, oh, I have my second coffee at 1 p.m. every afternoon. And when I can't have it one day because life dictates that I just can't get to a coffee that day, I don't think I'm as spiritual, right? I do think there's these things that have power that I give connection to. And maybe coffee's a stretch, even though I do think that's true, but definitely nicotine. Like, let me not vape and see how spiritual I am for a couple of days, right? So I don't know. I mean, by that definition, I guess I'm not clean, and so I should stop worrying about it.
Is it still is life still manageable with caffeine, though? There's that keyword, manageable.
But I've had a manageable life at times with certain portions of drug use, and I definitely wasn't clean.
Yeah, but for what length of time? All right, I was good for that hour.
What about somebody who's on methadone for 30 years and goes to work every day? Like, I don't think they're clean. I mean, they might, but again, by my old definition of clean, of course. Like, at this point, I don't think clean is actually a thing.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I know, like, I have reached for a cup of coffee in the same energy that I used to reach for a beer, like, oh my God, this day, and I'll grab a cup of coffee as if that's going to solve it. And, it doesn't lead to 6 more coffees. Just one coffee in a deep breath usually helps me out. But I know I've had that same feeling that I would reach for that coffee like I used to reach for a drink.
So, yeah, I mean, we could probably have a whole nother episode on that, because I don't even think I was done talking that day, and you didn't get to talk that day. So. But let's focus in on talking to our kids about drugs. I think this is slowly changing in our society. Like, I heard more about drugs from Dare than I did my parents, right? Like, the rhetoric on the TV was Nancy Reagan and just say no. And Dare came in and taught us about all these drugs and how great they were, or how they'd mess us up, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
And that was middle school. I didn't even understand what they were talking about really a whole lot. It was like, oh God, we got to do this.
Do you know what I remember? This is how I remembered the difference. So barbiturates were the slow ones and amphetamines were the fast ones. So barbiturates I remember with barbiturates and amphetamines. That stuck with me.
Did they teach you that in DARE?
Yeah, they taught about barbiturates and amphetamines, and that's how I remembered it, for the quiz. Was it, or maybe it was health class, DARE, health class, I don't know.
Yeah,
blend it together.
Yeah. And I think my parents maybe just said, drugs are bad, okay? Like, that was about the extent of what I got.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember, like, being 7 in second grade. For some reason, this memory sticks out. And they taught us about smoking cigarettes in school and how bad it was for you. And I do remember leaving school thinking, why would anybody ever smoke? And I think I even said that to my parents. Like, that's the dumbest thing ever.
Did your parents smoke?
No.
Oh.
But I just remember feeling that way. Like, that is so stupid. Why would anybody ever do that?
Yeah.
And
my dad smoked. And I remember hating smoking right up to the day I started smoking.
yeah,
Like,
I started at 14 and it was like, it was on.
I was like 13 or 14.
I'm a smoker.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. And I was. And I still, I guess, technically kind of am.
Oh, one
I
day.
know. I call it vaping, but it's similar.
You should quit, Jason.
One day. All right. So what did your parents tell you about drugs?
So yeah, we had the regular elementary school education, and at home, so, drinking, it happened. So I'm watching my parents drink and family, aunts, uncles, grandpa every day. But then it was like, the message was like, no, not for you. When you're old enough, you can. And it was like almost like a crowning achievement.
Oh, yeah. Like
So-
a driver's license?
Yeah, it was like, one day you'll be able to drink too. And I was like, ooh, I can't wait to drink. I remember thinking, even little, like single digit age, I can't wait to drink, because all the grown-ups were having way more fun.
Right.
And it was like, one day, no. And they'd they'd let me smell it and hold it, and I would fetch it for them. And not for you. You can't have this yet. You're too young, but one day you'll be able to drink. But they also had the message of no drinking and driving. I do remember that. Like Uncle Al can't take the motorcycle now. He's had too many. So I do remember that lesson. And not too much about drugs. Maybe in high school it was like, don't do drugs. They'll finger like, just don't do drugs, but not a lot of deep conversation at all. The conflicting message was like, like once you're old enough, you can drink, but they didn't talk about the negative sides. They never talked about hangovers, the money.
Poor decision making.
Yeah. I mean, literally like my dad would go out for like, they ended up getting a divorce when I was a teenager, but like, sometimes we wouldn't see him for days. Like, I'm not saying he was on a binge, but he would just go to work, party, go to work, party, go to work, party. We wouldn't even see him. And nobody ever equated that to alcohol, And my brother and I started putting things together about it. But yeah, so that was my message for alcohol. And it was just always the crowning. And I remember this too. So they really wanted me to go to college. And I did for a little bit until I drank myself out of college. But they really wanted me to go to college, and all they ever talked about in college was the partying. And
I love it. There's parties.
Yeah, and they would have pictures of like frat parties, and I mean, I swear to God, we had like the wall of pictures, family pictures, and in the dead center was a frat party picture. Like, it looked like Animal House. So, they wanted me to go to college, and nobody ever said about how much hard work it is. They just talked about the partying. That was the message about alcohol. So I was really primed up for alcoholism.
It's not a shock from that idea that you went to college and partied.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you were told.
Yep. That was all I looked forward to. So I did start drinking in high school, and that's when my parents got divorced, and neither of them wanted to really look at that. They kind of looked the other way. And I was smoking cigarettes too. I mean, clearly you can't hide cigarette smoking. You smell like a cigarette,
Right.
So I was 13, 14, smelled like a cigarette. And nobody really wanted to like acknowledge that,
I had a bedroom that was like on a different floor from my parents, but I mean, if you smoke in a house, you
definitely
smell the smoke.
Yeah.
And I just smoked in my bedroom, and every once in a while somebody be shitty and say something about it, but generally, it just got ignored. I had a black light in my room and a big black light pot leaf poster at like 15. And
Jason's fine. He must be into that rock and roll.
Kids experiment, I guess. I don't know what the hell they were thinking, but So Jenny, 1 + 1 is 2, and college is partying, and you did all that perfectly, just the way you were taught.
Nailed it.
So it's interesting. You talked about the idea of glorifying this certain age when you can drink, and there have been people that proposed the idea that the reason Europe or other parts of the world, but Europe in particular, doesn't have the kind of alcoholism or addiction that we do in the US is because it's normalized way earlier, right?
Mm.
Having a glass of wine at dinner, 7-year-olds can do that, right? 14-year-olds definitely are doing that. Like, that's not a big thing. So it's not this wait until this age. It's so glorifying. Once you get there, you've arrived. I don't actually think that's really that accurate, that's useful. I think it's entirely for a different culture, but
yeah,
it is interesting that those two things exist at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah, I like shudder when you say 7-year-old drinking, but I'm like, but and they have European values are totally different than American values, so I think they're better set up for mental health in general, let alone except Finland. I think they're pretty fucked up.
I know nothing about Finland.
No, I think they have like outrageous alcoholism rates. It's gotten better, but I just remember they were like world champions for alcoholism.
World champion.
Way to go, Finland.
I do think I saw some stat recently, and I don't even remember what the stat was or what it was about, but it was something negative, and like they were second to the US, even though they've got like so fewer people in the world. Like they were the second worst, and I was like, oh wow.
When I got sober, when you get sober, all of a sudden like new things are coming to your attention that you never thought of before, and there was a PSA out of Finland, and it showed what you look like to your kids as a drunk, and I was like, wow, eye-opening. Like no translation, language translation necessary. It showed what you look like to your kids as a drunk, and that really encouraged me along my path.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think our language is changing as our understanding of addiction, drug use, whatever you'd like to refer to it as, is changing, right? Mm-hmm. We don't, I think the message we were getting, we were definitely all in on it's a moral failing and you're just weak-willed and you have no self-control or self-will to stop, and drug users are bad people, right? And so just don't do them and you won't be a bad person.
Yeah.
And I think the more the science has helped us understand that this is really a mental health issue and, it's coming from a different place, I think people are starting to get that information. It's weird. It's like science gets information, then the professionals read it and understand it, and then they start giving it out, and then it hits like pop culture, universal understanding like 30 years later or something. But,
yeah.
So we're slowly getting there, but I still think it's very confusing for parents like us who were raised in this one place, and so we still have this lingering subconscious, this is kind of how we think about it. Even though we understand it's not that way, like that old message still filters in, and it's hard to, what do I do when my child uses drugs or my child is encountering a mental health dilemma? And what do I do before they ever get there, like to try to help avoid that or give them the tools to not do that? And I think that's where this conversation comes in, right? Mm-hmm. What and how, as parents, can we, you mentioned break the cycle of addiction or mental health. And like, I can't say that I really know. I think it'll be a useful conversation and I got some ideas, but how the fuck do you help people with a problem that, from my understanding, and this isn't universal, but my belief is kind of like, hey, you have these traumas or ACEs, right? Adverse childhood experiences. We did an episode about that. You have these in your youth, and through these traumas and attachment issues of like not feeling enough, not feeling loved, you seek out coping skills. And it just so happens that when you're in pain emotionally, when you don't feel right, when you don't feel connected to anything in the world, drugs feel really fucking good. And they fix all that. Mm-hmm. So they're actually like, they're much more a solution when you find them than a problem. And, especially with adults giving kids all this, oh my God, if you smoke one marijuana, you'll die, right? And then they do smoke a marijuana and they don't die.
Right.
Well, then they're like, well, that's all bullshit now. So I don't think the miseducation was helpful, but what is helpful? What can we give people as our kids? Like yours are youngish still.
Yeah, I have 7 and 10.
Right.
And so you bring up the ACEs. I guess to start minimizing the ACEs. I know that was, I do not propose to have all the answers, but I'm trying to keep those aces to a min. And just trying to like in AA, they talk about the hole in the soul, just trying not to get that hole started. I know the world is still going to bring stuff, to my girls' way, but I'm going to try to do my best to protect them. And I'm starting to talk to them about drugs and alcohol now. So 7 and 10. And what about you?
Oh God, So I have 2 15s, a 12, a 7, and a 2, and I would say with my oldest two, my twins, I have had conversations about, kind of like what Billy says, and I honestly I'm not sure how useful it is, but I think they should at least know it. Like, hey, I struggled with this in my history. Your mother struggled with this in her history. And, from what we understand through research, that at least makes you 50% more susceptible to struggling with this. So if you're going to try it, just know that going into it, right? Like, this could be a real big problem for you, like it was for me and your mother. And not everybody lives through that. Like I guess not everybody lives through that. Their mother didn't, right? I have so far. So I guess I was a little more open with them. Like, they know that I used. I don't think they know a whole lot of the details. I honestly had this grand plan that when they turned 14, the next year at my anniversary, I was going to bring them and let them hear my story. And then the pandemic happened. And so I didn't. I don't know how useful it would have been, but I thought it was relevant, and I wanted to wait to an age where it was appropriate, because I cuss a lot and say some weird shit when I share. I didn't want to take them too young. But no, I've been pretty open with them, but I don't honestly feel like with my younger three that I've had a whole lot. I mean, the 12-year-old hears a lot through being around when the older ones are around and there's conversation. And I don't necessarily try to hide it from any of them, but it's just like, it just doesn't seem relevant. And truthfully, I don't know if that's a whole lot helpful versus what you were talking about, is like trying to avoid the aces and the problems to begin with, right? Like trying to give them really healthy, strong attachment where they know they're loved and valued. Like, from my point of view at this point in time, that's much more valuable to give my kids than telling them, hey, I use drugs, or drugs are bad.
So the 7-year-old, I should clarify something real quick for the audience. So my 10-year-old has Down syndrome. And so she doesn't ask a lot of questions. And I mean, it's not like 10-year-olds can't, it's not like people with Down syndrome can't drink or do drugs, but the chances of my daughter getting into addiction are much less than my typical 7-year-old. So the 7-year-old ends up asking more questions. And this summer, not too long ago, she asked me, she's like, Mom, were you addicted to alcohol? And I was like, whoop. I didn't know where that question came from, but except for that, we do talk about drinking and drugs as it comes up. Like, it's in a movie, like, that movie Ratatouille, like they drink.
They do drinking in that?
Yeah, there's drinking in that. And
really?
I think I've said out loud, I'm like, man, they drink a lot of wine in a kid's movie. And we've talked about drinking in the sense of, maybe she's overheard me say like, oh, will there be alcohol there? I don't even know. We just don't have a lot of drinking friends, but we went to a 4th of July party. And when we arrived, we're like saying hello and hugging and stuff. And the man of the house was like, opens the cooler of beers. He's like, hey, help yourself. And Billy, the 7-year-old's like, we don't drink alcohol. And I didn't even know like she had that expression in her, repertoire. But apparently I have said that we don't drink alcohol. But yeah, so recently she asked me, Mom, were you addicted to alcohol? And in the moment we were like running, I'm like, let's talk about that. But not right now, because we were like running somewhere or whatever. So then within a few days, I did have a chance to talk to her about it. And I only answered what she asked. I didn't go too far. And I was like, yes, I was addicted to alcohol. I hurt people I love. And I could have been in an accident. And I had to ask for help to stop. And now that's when I told her, so she knows I go to a meeting every Thursday. And I said, so that meditation meeting I go to, that is for people who had trouble with drinking or drugs. And so she kind of put the big picture together. But then I stopped there and I'll just wait for her to ask more questions. But I kind of wanted her slightly informed because if it came up at school, if anybody was like, oh, your mom runs that drug and alcohol meeting or anything like that, I didn't want her quite so blindsided, you know. So I'm glad she has like a basis for that. No questions since.
She's 7. There's Roblox and Minecraft to do.
Seriously, I think it went right from like, okay, did I tell you about Piggy in Minecraft? I'm like, what?
I don't think there's any alcohol in Minecraft, so that's good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
You know, when you're sensitive to it, it's funny how often you see alcohol in cartoons. You're like, is that really necessary? You know?
And just how glorified it is across the board in our society.
Yeah.
If you didn't know, if you just came to the U.S. and, you know, lived here for a month and saw all the advertising, billboards, commercials, whatever, sporting events, you would say, God, 95% of this population drinks.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not even close. It's less than 50.
Yep, that was a question on my intake. They're like, how much of the population do you think drinks? And I knew it was a trick question by the way he phrased it. So I went, I don't know, I think I said like 60%. He's like, no. At the time, I think it was like 40%.
Yeah, it's incredibly low considering.
First thing that flashed in my head, I was like, are there that many Mormons? Like, I was thinking about all the Amish and Mormons, but that's because that's who I surrounded myself with was like all people who drink.
Well, it's the message our society gives. I mean,
totally.
Even the message of, you know, drink responsibly starts with drink.
Right. Right. That's all you hear. Drink responsibly.
Don't drink or make responsible decisions about if you want to drink. It's just drink responsibly.
Yeah. Every new strip mall that goes up, there's a liquor store in it. Seriously. Check out. That was on my like resentment list. Why do we need so many liquor stores?
To sell all the alcohol.
God, can we get a shoe store? Like,
so I think how you choose to talk about drugs and alcohol to your children, and I don't want to lose the mental health aspect because that's how I conceptualize all this. So I think that's crucial too. But how you talk to your kids is definitely going to depend on how you view the problem. Right? Because how you view the problem is how you're going to view the solution. And that's kind of what we said earlier. If you think it's a moral failing, you're going to say, don't do it, right? Just don't do it. You'll be morally strong if you don't, right? Great character. He didn't do drugs. But if you view this as like a problem where people are using as a coping skill because they can't cope with life without it, then the conversation really has, to me, in my mind, has little to do about drugs or alcohol. And it's really about like, how do we find coping skills? How do we feel safe and comfortable in our bodies? Because that's the whole thing, right? What I believe, and what, you know, others in my field believe is that like, trauma, ACEs, however you want to conceptualize this issue that happens to humans. Maybe it's just happening to humans because it's 2021 and we're all on cell phones and who knows why, right? Maybe it's not even trauma. But we're getting to a place where our regulatory system in our bodies feels like we're being attacked by, you know, vicious lions or something at all times. And then our brain is sending the signal that nothing's wrong. So what's wrong with you for feeling like you're in this life or death situation all the time? But then we're got to find a way to cope, right? You can't just stay in this dysregulated, oh my God, life's going to end if my friend doesn't invite me, if I don't get 100 likes on my picture, if this boy doesn't talk to me or respond to my text. Like everything feels life or death. And at that state, you need something to help, man. That's painful, right? Mm-hmm. Or along with that state, the idea of, I don't even want to call it depression, but just this idea that life isn't enjoyable. There's like no joy ever. Like even on the best day of your life, when you do get the 100 likes and the boy does text back, there's just no joy inside of you, right? And I think that's a place that a lot of people, or at least some people, are getting to. And that's a life of pain, right? And I read this book recently. The guy was like getting off heroin and all these things kept going well in his life. And he just kept ending up back on heroin because life felt like pain. And he used a painkiller to treat it, right? And he couldn't find a way out of that. And he couldn't understand why he couldn't feel good, because he loved his daughter and he loved his wife and he wanted to just feel good in that moment, but he couldn't. And I think, for me at least, looking at, you know, what people are going through that lens of like, they just can't do anything else and they are just in pain. And if you were in pain, who wouldn't seek relief? that makes it make a lot of sense to me, but I don't know that that helps with how to talk to them. Like, that's more of how do we help people not get to that painful place? And I don't know that I have an answer for that.
I definitely don't have an answer for it, but I see where you're coming from. It makes me think of, too, didn't they find like monkeys in the jungle, like getting fucked up for fun? Like, are they having early childhood trauma? Like, what's,
Well, and that's a thing, I think, one of the things that's been weighing on my mind lately. Honestly, this book really
Monkeys in the jungle, really?
Yes, I think about monkeys in the jungle all the time. And they're bad monkeys, and we should spank them. This book has messed my head up, right? Because I'm like, I kind of feel like maybe I ignore it, but I sort of live in this state of like, life just doesn't really feel good enough, kind of at all times. Even on the great days, it's like I don't feel as connected as I'd like, and I don't feel like I want to just push through and take my kids out in the front yard and kick a soccer ball around or throw a baseball, and it's like I just can't. And I'm like, I don't want this to be all my life is, and I don't have, and so it just got me thinking and reading and researching and IV ketamine treatment for depression and people who microdose for a month to, restart their brain and create these new channels and all this stuff. And I'm like, what if, right? And I look back at our history and I feel like every ancient civilization or culture had these moments, whether they called it a Friday night kegger or whether they called it like seeking spiritual enlightenment with peyote, like whatever it was, all these ancient cultures did have these times when they used something, whether that was something they smoked, something they drank, something they ingested to have a psychedelic experience. From time to time, that was part of what they did. And I just wonder, I'm like, yeah, I get that we come from a place of drugs are bad and, we should never do them and we'll never stop doing them. But I'm wondering if there's not this healthy place of like, this is what our culture does every so often because fucking living without it is ridiculous. And, doing it creates this environment for a different purpose, right? It's not just like, oh, let's get fucked up. It's let's seek spiritual enlightenment. Let's look for God. Let's just have an out of my body experience for a while. Whatever it is, like, I feel like that always has existed. And now we're kind of missing that to an extent.
So you think this whole like, addiction crisis is like part of the level up process?
I think it's the fact that we don't know how to live in tune and connection with our bodies and with the universe, kind of.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And that just puts us in a place of not ever finding joy. And what do you do when there's no joy, right? You gotta seek. When you're always in pain, you seek a painkiller. I guess that's one of the things that just stuck out from this book. Like, if you're in pain, you seek a painkiller. And removing the painkiller does not remove the pain. And what do you do with that? How do you solve that problem? And I'm not trying to solve addiction here. Like, this is more, how do we help our youth, like, not need it to survive? But I guess when you brought up the monkeys getting messed up, it just made me think, like, maybe the goal isn't really abstinence. Like, maybe it's like, hey, once a year we all go out to, I think of Burning Man as like the ultimate like modern version of this, but maybe there's something better than Burning Man that we come up with, that it's like, hey, once a year we go on sabbatical and we all take mushrooms and we fucking try to seek being a better person.
Maybe, yeah.
Coming from the right place.
Yeah.
I don't think that helps addiction.
I know, because some people are going to go to that and be like, why can't we have 3 Burning Mans a year?
Right. Well, maybe we do need it every 3 months. Right. Yeah. The whole idea, if they invented a pill that cured addiction, like, the addict would say, what would 2 do for me?
Yeah.
I get that. I think that state, though, of wanting to be, and that's kind of how it's been conceptualized by some people in my field, is people who feel safe and regulated in their bodies don't often seek to be out of their bodies. They just don't have the desire to, because they already feel safe and comfortable. People who feel dysregulated and unsafe at all times always want to be out of their bodies. And so I think our modern society has created this culture where everybody feels unsafe all the time. Like this is just the byproduct of technology, whatever, progress, whatever we want to call it. And so now we're all seeking this escape, whether that's the drug, the alcohol, the cell phone, the sex, the gambling. Like we're all seeking something to occupy our time. The Netflix, right? The binge watching Netflix episodes. Like I don't think that's something that somebody who feels healthy does.
Yeah. I think, did you tell me this one? It's that technology and society is evolving faster than our brains can?
No.
Okay.
I don't think. If I did, I made it up.
Well, what do you think of it?
It's possible. I guess I look at that whole rat park experiment where they took the rats that had like these wonderful conditions. They had a little rat swimming pool. Maybe they had a rat diving board, right? Maybe they had rat swimsuits and hot rat
soft
girls.
serve ice cream.
Right, rat soft. Yours are much more nice than mine. Mine are like pornographic rats, and yours are like humble ice cream eating rats. But anyway, the rats who had all these enjoyable things and the ball to play with and the frisbee to throw around, like I'm sure rats aren't throwing frisbees, but they tried cocaine and then had it available and didn't go back to it. Whereas the rats who were in, the cage with absolutely fucking nothing went back to the cocaine time and time again. And I don't know that so much works. Like, I don't think you could just take our society and put us in this utopia and all of a sudden we're better. But growing up, that's our internal landscape is how I look at Rat Park, right? Our internal landscape is empty now. And so we need these drugs. Whereas if we grow up in some kind of environment that we can give our kids, hopefully, where the internal landscape feels peacefully and like we're lying on a beach at all times, right? Then we don't need these escapes. And so from that context, if we could get to that place where we don't need the escapes, I don't think Burning Man happens 4 times a year. I don't think we want to.
Did they do a Rat Park experiment where they started them in the bleak environment, then put them in the Rat Park?
I actually think they did that as part of that experiment. And it worked.
Do rats get early childhood trauma?
No, I don't believe so. Domesticated animals can be traumatized, but wild animals don't. And I guess these rats were domesticated, but I still think it's much more difficult because they go through the entire process and experience of the traumatic event. And then at the end, they like shake it off and shit and just run off and they're fine. Whereas we don't follow through in the process. We get stuck. Our regulatory systems, our nervous systems get stuck in the traumatic experience. And so our body moves on, but our insides stay in that either fight or flight or the freeze.
Because human beings tell stories. Rats don't tell stories.
Right.
And we're telling ourselves the same stories.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have a way to complete the process. So I don't know if any of that long-winded explanation helps us with what we need to do. I think we got off a little bit on the monkeys getting high.
But it's so fun to think about monkeys getting high.
This episode has been brought to you in part by Voices of Hope, Inc., a nonprofit recovery organization made up of people in recovery, family members, and allies. Together, members strive to protect the dignity of those that use drugs and those in recovery by advocating for treatment, harm reduction and support resources, and mentoring. Please visit us at www.voicesofhopemaryland.org and consider donating to our cause.
I don't want to get too in detail and personal. My daughter is struggling with her mental health, right? If you're struggling with your mental health, if you don't feel good in your body, that's a problem and should be taken pretty seriously. Even if the fear isn't losing your child, like just the fact that your child is that discontent and at that much dis-ease in their life, like that should be serious enough for any of us. And I get it, right? We got jobs, we got to get the groceries, we got to pay the bills, we got to keep up with the sports activities, but we got to take the time to address this and look at it like it's a serious issue. And I think one of the most important things for me right now in that situation is to make sure that she knows that however she feels, it's okay. right? And I've been like, because I'm in that situation, thinking a lot about that. And when I say she's okay when she feels that way, I don't mean like she doesn't need help. I mean like you are allowed and perfectly, it's reasonable to feel this thing you're feeling. And it got me to thinking about when I first got clean, and I haven't thought about this for a long time, but I remember sitting in a meeting and saying, there's something really wrong with me because I'm an addict and my parents didn't even divorce. That was a big thing to me. Like, I just assumed, like, if people had childhood abuse, child sex abuse, if your parents got divorced, like, those were traumatic events. And it would make total sense if you got high after that and needed drugs. Like, those are serious, right? My parents didn't even divorce. What the fuck am I using for? I'm just a piece of shit. I remember that, right? And I'm like watching my daughter struggle and trying to almost like trying to blindly point, right? It's like pin the tail on the donkey. Like, what? Why? And she just can't. And I want her to know that you don't need a fucking reason. Right? Maybe there is a great reason and we just don't know it yet. Maybe it was something that had happened when you were a kid that you're not aware of. Maybe your mother didn't pick you up when you were crying in the crib and you fucking, never got comforted. Maybe you never learned how to co-regulate. That's all possible. Maybe it's just in your fucking biology. I don't know. And I don't think any of us know that answer yet. But the fact is, whether we find out later, oh yeah, now this repressed memory came back, it was totally that caused this, or whether we don't, you feel that way. That's valid. That's enough. Like, we don't even have to have a reason. You don't have to feel like something's just fucking wrong with you because you feel that way. No, you feel that way. That's okay. We're going to do something.
In early recovery, I found it helpful knowing that it wasn't my fault, or at least believing that. And then I came to a place, early on, believing that it wasn't my fault helped me get clean. And then later, as I healed and progressed, I owned my part. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, for some reason early, knowing that, it was kind of written in the stars, helped me seek recovery.
Right. Well, and I think that's
it was the mindset I needed to get help.
Well, but is it a bad mindset? And is it not true? Like, we say it's a mindset, like, oh, well, it's not true, but I needed to think that for a while to get here.
I think there was a lot of mindsets for me in early recovery that just helped me get to a place. And, but you change, you grow.
Do you think you are responsible for your alcoholism?
Ooh, tough question. Yeah, so even though I came from an alcoholic dysfunctional background, I still had free will, I guess. Wow, on what level do I accept responsibility?
Do you really have free will?
Right? Do I? I don't know.
Could you really walk out into the world and decide 1 + 1 is 3?
No, you're right, because I believe I am just a product of my environment.
We do what we're taught.
Mm-hmm. I'm a product of my environment, so my parents, my hometown, the United States of America, planet Earth. I'm not very special. I'm just a product.
It's kind of depressing, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's, what could we do? What could I have done different? I truly believe, and I came to this in my therapy, if I wouldn't have had drugs, I would have killed myself. I really believe that. I had some self-harm behaviors in my teenage years, and they only came out when I didn't have drugs.
Right. What would, if I didn't fall in with the bad crowd in high school, what would have come of me?
God, if I didn't fall in. Do you think you fell in with the bad crowd? I sought the bad crowd. The bad crowd looked on the outside like I felt on the inside. Right?
I swear to God, they selected me. They're like, we heard your parents are getting divorced. Come with us. I swear, that's pretty much how it happened.
If I wouldn't have been abducted by aliens when I was 3. No, I don't know. I don't think I can claim any responsibility. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that would argue. I see people. Look, I post these memes all the fucking time. People have arguments. I'm just trying to be entertaining. They're having arguments about whether Suboxone's clean, whether NA needs to shut the fuck up, whether, you had a choice in using or not. Like, all these different arguments. So I know there's a whole slew of opinions about how all this works and what it comes from. And there's people who are clean from addiction. And I don't know if this is so they can take credit for being clean, but they're like, oh no, it was definitely, I chose it and now I don't choose it and blah, blah. And I'm like, I just don't see it that way. I do not. And I know people will sit here and say, no, dude, you were totally responsible for picking up your drug. You know what? If I was, it saved my life. It was a protector. It was a protector piece of me that said, man, if we don't do something, we ain't going to make it. And we did something.
Yeah, I think so. I know there's certain parts of my, my makeup that kind of shut down early on and they woke up in recovery. So yes, if I didn't drink, how much more would have shut down? Like memories and access to emotions and, that self-worth kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's true.
Yeah, but what do we do with that information? What can we really tell our kids that helps, right? Because my daughter is struggling and not really in a place where she hears a lot like of what I'm saying. She's 15, almost 16. I'm the old dad that doesn't fucking understand, even though honestly, she's so much like me at that age that it's like, dude, I don't think anybody on this earth understands better than me.
My first reaction is, can everything slow down? Like, can just everything like just slow down? Like barbiturates. Nice.
Should we give her barbiturates?
No, but I just that's my gut reaction. When the connection is lost, slow down the distractions, like reassess your connection or just reconnect with her. And it might have to be like, I know you're busy as shit too. Like, I mean, like you can't stop work. So slow down, to a point. I mean, that's my initial reaction. Well, we've heard, the word depressed, deep rest, maybe just slowing down, the family as a unit.
I just don't know, right? I
Right.
want to give her the ability to know that it's okay to be wherever she's at. Not
Right.
okay in the sense that you don't need to do something about it, but it's okay to have whatever feeling of life is fucking miserable and I don't understand why, but it just is. Okay.
You are, the message, you are whole just as you are. What is happening is complete. How good. I can't remember the words. Help me.
This is complete just as it is.
That's it.
So I don't want to get us too far away from like the idea here of what can we really give our kids? And so this is where I get confused. I want to say, so my oldest two have a different mom. They spent at least half the time with her for their first 7 years, right? And during that time, I do not know what happened with them, right? They obviously got a different experience than they did at my house. I know that much. I know they were exposed through their mother and their mother's family to like movies they had no business watching. Like they would definitely sit at their grandmother's house on that side at 5, 6, and there would be R-rated horror films and slashers and titties and fucks and all that. Like never gonna happen at my house, right? Like you're not catching any of that. In fact, I miss most R-rated movies because there's no time to watch it. After the kids go to bed, I go to bed. But yeah, so I know the little bit I know from there, I can only guess what other negative stuff they were exposed to, right? I know they were like, in my mind, walking to school by themselves way too early, right? I've heard stories about their mother not getting out of bed and them like scrounging for food in the kitchen and like eating peanut butter and shit out of the cabinet, just out of the bucket. Like, so I've heard some stuff. So who knows what they got there? That was a long way of saying that, right? And I, own my stuff. Like I was much more like my father in their first years of life, maybe their first 10 years of life. Maybe not that much. Not that I don't still have those moments when I'm not what I call a good parent at all, right? They still come out, but they're fewer and fewer and farther between. But like definitely their first 7, 8, 9 years of life, like I wasn't the prettiest dad, right? It felt like the good dad and then this fucking Hulk creature that came out that was angry and loud, just like my father, and, screaming at people about how you gotta be better. And so they got that. Right? Which is what I don't know, but I think is part of what fucked me up too from my dad, right? But here's where it gets interesting. Not to say that the twin sister doesn't have her struggles or that her struggles might not be harder to recognize or in different ways. But generally, her reaction to going through that same experience, for the most part, isn't the same reaction. And so, like, if we want to blame these ACEs and this trauma, I'm not saying it's not, right? But here we have the one sister who went through this and, like, really is having this incredibly awful experience. And then the other one who is going to school and getting good grades and pretty trustworthy and honest and not trying all these risky behaviors. And I think that's, I'm not trying to portray one as a bad kid, one as a good kid, right? But it's more one can make decisions that keep her safe. And the other one is making decisions to try to fix her problem, but they're putting her in dangerous situations, whether that's for her life or what. Like, they're really dangerous situations.
This is a fascinating twin study, and surely they aren't the first set to be like this, aren't there? Do you have access to other twin stories that are like this?
No, but I mean, I think what we've decided is that it comes down to epigenetics. Like, you have your genetics that will react certain ways depending on your environment, right? And like, there's this epigenetics that layer on top of that kind of change what that reaction's going to be. And so they can have different underlying genetics that the epigenetics filter out differently, so they can go through the same thing and experience it different. It's like the person who can walk away from a devastating car crash that killed people, and they're like, yeah, it was awful, but I'm moving on with life. And the other person who's just hung up there and, loses their job because they can't go to work anymore. Well, and maybe they had differing experiences too, here, there, or otherwise, right? Like, my remembering of this, which is not other adults remembering of this in my life, is that the daughter that's able to make the safe decisions, she was more connected-minded early on. Like, she was very interactive with adults and wanted to be clingy and around them. And the daughter that struggles with safe decision-making, she always kind of kept to herself. And so, that can play a role. Like, that sounds like biology and DNA, but also that feeds itself, where the more interactive one is going to get more interaction and more love and more connection because she's trying to.
And how old were they then? I
mean, this is from birth. Like, that was
interesting.
The experience with both of them, that one really wanted to be clingy and around you, and one, and I remember thinking, oh my God, look at this great kid over there just playing all by herself, doesn't need anything. And yeah, scary, because it didn't really work out that way. So I guess all that to say, like, I still don't know what I could have done different, because I don't know what exactly they went through that caused this, because only one of them is really having the experience. Could I have been a better father? Absolutely. And I wish I had the information and the capability to, but I don't know that changes this.
Right. Hindsight's always 20/20 or 2021. What year is it?
So I don't know what, I guess what I want to give my daughter right now, I want to give her the ability to know that it's okay. She doesn't need a reason for how she feels this way. We're not, I'm not blaming her. I understand at least that this is not a moral failing and that she's not a bad person, right? I might not completely understand what she's going through, but I want her to know she's not alone. You're not alone in it. I will be here with you. I will try to help you with it in any way that you or I think might work. Like, I'm willing to try some shit. I'm willing to step outside the box. I guess that's what I want to give her. I don't know that it's helping.
That sounds like the best thing you can give her. Like, that's a totally open and willing dad.
So is that what we need to give him before that? Is that what we need to give him from birth?
Yeah. I
don't feel like I could have. I don't know that I can go out and tell parents, hey, you need to be open to anything from day one, because I wouldn't have been, and I still don't think I would. Like, I need to know that this is life or death.
You can be open and still say, fuck no.
At
least consider it. At least think it through. Be thorough.
So how do we give our kids that idea that they're not alone and that we're there with them, and not go the fuck outside and play and leave me alone until bedtime?
Shit, I don't know. I say practice every day. Just practice every day. You're still going to have, like, I need to be alone. But if you bank up as much as you can, I'm just trying to arrange my life so that, I and I don't want to make you sound like you're being selfish. You've got a great life. You know, you have a career, family, extracurricular, you donate time. And I think that's awesome. And it's all like a real good package. And I have mine set up where I have my family time. I make sure I do what I need to stay sober. And I try to fill their bucket every day, you know, with a little something, That's my preemptive. I have younger kids. And I mean, I do have some black and white rules, you know, there's going to be no drugs and no alcohol. So, and if you're an adult and you choose that, you know, like there's going to be no sliding like, well, it's okay if you had a little edibles. Nope. That's not like,
that's unrealistic.
Well, I'm going to try for it. And then I'll
Doesn't that still set them up for the whole? So I dated this girl at one point, and she was really sheltered. Mm-hmm. And then she went to college and fucked it all up because all of a sudden there was no rules and nobody to monitor her and no sheltering. And I don't know that that's exactly a thing if you're not searching for it anyway, but still, like,
and that case happens too. But I'm going to try to do like, you know, I'm not going to send her out in the world with like, you know, like unrealistic stuff. You know, it's going to be like, you're not going to do drugs because we have a family history of addiction and I don't want you trying it. And if you do drugs, these are your consequences, laying them out ahead of time.
So I guess to wrap up, like, I love you. I believe you. Like, I think the disbelief or the invalidation of how our kids feel is extremely detrimental. I don't know that it super helps to validate them and believe them, but it can't hurt. And I think the other alternative is really, really awful to just try to understand, right? Just try to understand what they're going through or where they might be. Try to conceptualize it in a place of they can't do anything different because they don't feel anything good. And I think, you know, I don't know, just trying to give them that message from day one. Like, I love you and I'm here. And
yeah. And if you can't be there from day one, start where you are.
Yeah, that's a good point for a lot of people who don't have that day one experience because of our problems. I don't know. Anything else?
This was deep, man.
Ugh, too heavy. All right. Take it easy. Be safe. Love your kids. Did you like this episode? Share it with people you think might get something out of it. Check out the rest of our episodes at recoverysortof.com. Also, while you're there, you can find ways to link up with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, anything. We're always looking for new ideas. Got an idea you want us to look into? Reach out to us.